everyone, my name is Naomi O'Brien. I have been an educator for over 11 years and I enjoy teaching students and teachers all about reading. Just a little bit about me and my past and my background when it comes to reading is that when I started teaching over 11 years ago, when I was in the classroom, I always seemed to have really great reading scores. And the reason for this is it kind of was luck at first. I was following a reading program that just so happened to implement phonics and phonemic awareness and all of the other things that come along with structured literacy in a really cool way. And because I was a new teacher, I was so afraid of not teaching the curriculum with fidelity that I just stuck to it. Whereas a lot of my colleagues were skipping the phonemic awareness section because they didn't really find it to be useful. And that year there were about 8 teachers on my team and 4 of us followed it and 4 did not. And what I noticed my second year was that the 4 of us that followed it and did not skip that section in the book, it was called Imagine It Reading, our students had really good reading results. And I realized all of those silly little activities like beginning sounds, rhyming, alliteration, segmenting sounds, and all these like little just sound games were actually the thing that our students needed. Now, the one thing that this program was lacking was moving from simple phonics onto more complex. We basically took the whole kindergarten year to learn A through Z, the letter names first, then the sounds, like 1 letter a week. It dragged on and on and on. And then we added some blends at the end of the year. And I've told this story a lot, but I'll never forget it, that I had my students, we had a leveled text that, that came with the program that was teaching students certain sight words. Like, it was like, I like. So it was like, I like this, I like that. And it was like, I like cars or something, or I like to draw. That's what it was the word draw. And the student in front of me was just saying like, d, r, a, w, d, r, a, w. So saying all of the sounds that I had taught them so far and could not put together the dr and the ah, making the AW making the ah sound. And in that moment, it occurred to me that we're not teaching them enough phonics skills. And now this was my second year teaching. So I started looking into what are other phonics elements like this. And when I looked into AW, I realized like, oh, AU also says the sound. And I started looking into it more and more and more. Now at this time, and unfortunately it's not a thing anymore, but it was pbskids.org/lions. And it was this site for Between the Lines on PBS. And they had all of these wonderful sound videos with soft C and hard C and Y is a vowel and PH saying the sound. And I used to make my students listen to all of these songs every morning. So then the next year I was like, I need to come up with a plan for how I'm going to be teaching these sounds. Like, we have to go quickly through A through Z. So I had realized that I think I can get these students to learn A through Z even quicker if I just, drill it every day, all of the sounds every day. Why are we spending 1 week on a letter and a sound when we could just be drilling all of it and just keep dwindling down? Like students pick up on the sounds like, S says and T says T. Some of the other letters that don't really make the sound like their name, like, U, the kids want to say Y when it's So we would teach all of the easy sounds first, and then we would go on to some of the more complex ones and keep drilling it. But then we didn't stop there. We moved on to blends, and then we added in digraphs, which is going to be CH and TH. And I have a whole list that I'll show later of the order that I go in. And then kids just started really rocking and rolling because they could blend sounds thanks to phonemic awareness, all of those skills, which I'll also get into later. And then they had all of the phonics skills. So once they had the blending skills going on, which that takes time, like that's, your brain is changing, your brain is learning the ability to see the seams in an otherwise seemingly seamless language, and they can now break apart those sounds, hear all the sounds, put them back together to say a word. Once they know all of the letter combinations and the sounds they can make and they can recognize them with automaticity, they are in business. And it's so cool to just see happen, because you just see these readers start to sprout, you see their confidence grow. And I've been able to produce these results in kindergarten. I've done it. One year I had a pre-K and kindergarten split, and all of my preschoolers left reading Some of my preschoolers left higher than my kindergarten students, and they were still very well-adjusted young kids. They still went to their play centers, they went outside for an hour a day. It doesn't have to be either or. It doesn't have to be this rigorous academic setting where no play is involved and the students aren't learning through play. It can be both, and it's so impactful. Like when we take a look at our literacy scores, we cannot say, no, that's not important, save that for later, let kids be kids. Yes, let kids be kids, but also do not deny kids the right to learn how to read, right? So, my kids, I've done it with first graders, I've done it with second graders, and something that I've realized is it really doesn't matter how old you are, the same steps are needed. You need systematic phonics. You need to find out where are these kids, what letters do they know, what sounds do they know, and what do they need to learn, and you need to come up with a sequence that makes sense. You know, I'm gonna start here, the next natural step would be here. The sequence that I like to follow is going through, obviously A through Z, but then going into short vowels, going into blends, digraphs, and then going into long vowels with open syllables, letting students know that the reason that go says go is because there's no consonant closing it in. And I have all sorts of lessons that cover stuff like this more in depth that I keep saying I'll get into that later, but I will get into it later. But really just having a plan, going over long vowels made because of silent E, getting into vowel teams, like do they know what to do when they see an AI or an AY, getting into OUs and OWs and R controlled vowels like AR and ER, R and IR and OR, getting into more complex digraphs like PH and CH. There's the floss rule, like when you see FLSZ doubled at the end of a word after a short vowel, just make the one sound, right? So there's just so many things that we have to make sure we are teaching our kids and teaching them to the point where they really know it. Not introducing it and then moving on because the curriculum said only spend one day on this, but really truly making sure that they are familiar with these concepts, that they know them so well, and that they feel comfortable. I love to introduce these concepts 1 week at a time. And I do it in the form of spelling words. And now it's not just any old random spelling list. I introduce our sound of the week. Everything goes in an order. We use a sound wall to introduce the sounds. I introduce spelling words, and then there's a lot of routines that I use that, again, I'll get into in just a minute, to help solidify this. And all of these routines are research-based. They're multi-sensory. They're things that are gonna help the students store the words and the sounds and the letters and the formation of the letters in their brain so that they can retrieve it quickly, so that they can learn it and move on to the next sound and next sound spelling next week. So I am about to get into my routine and show you everything that I kept saying, like, I'll get into that later. I'm gonna show you exactly what I'm talking about. So get ready to take some notes. Hopefully it's some routines that you can take back into your classroom or even into your own home, because whether you're an educator, a parent, or a caregiver, these steps work in any environment, and it's the steps that all readers need to learn how to read, no matter what their age is. Okay, so I just wanted to take you through a week in my classroom, introducing sounds and then also doing some phonological awareness activities and just what that would look like each day. So here is day one, which would typically be on a Monday for my students, where I greet them with a morning message. And then we always do a feelings check-in, just because I never want to start diving into an academic lesson and students are not, good to go. Like if they're upset about something, or if they're distracted because they're super excited about something, or if they're feeling scared or nervous, we have to talk about all that stuff first. So in my classroom setting, I usually have my students turn and talk, and I, will crouch down and check in with groups, make sure everybody's okay. We eat breakfast in the classroom, and then we usually set goals, and then we move on with our day. So my slides that I have, and I have some free weeks for you to try if you're interested in trying the format and seeing if it's good for you, is each week is a different phonological awareness skill. So for this particular week, it is blending and segmenting sounds, but it goes through each week. It just keeps cycling through all of the phonological awareness tasks. So it goes through syllables and rhyming, beginning sounds, onset and rhyme, middle sounds, final sounds, blending and segmenting, which is what this week we're going to see, and then also phoneme manipulation, where you are changing the sounds in words, adding sounds to the beginning, middle, or end, or taking off sounds or swapping sounds to see the new words. all of these activities are so, so, so important for changing a part of your brain. Our brains did not evolve to know how to read. They evolved for much different reasons. Reading is a man-made skill, so it takes so much intentional practice to rearrange like this part of our brain, to grow this area of our brain that was actually meant for recognizing objects from all different sorts of angles and perspectives, which is why we get a lot of letter reversals until that area is really developed and worked on. A lot of people jump straight to dyslexia when really it's that area hasn't been developed enough to stop with the reversals, which is what it is created for. So for this particular week, there's going to be blending sound. So all of the slides, they have directions on them. So I would just tell my students, I'm thinking of a word, listen to the sounds that I say, then blend them together to say my word. Also, there is research behind pairing your phonics with your phonological awareness. So if you are working with short A sounds and introducing that A says ah, then for your phonics, maybe you're doing rhyming words, try to use rhyming words that have short A. Or if you're doing beginning sounds, try to pick beginning sounds that have short A in it. Or segmenting sounds, segment sounds with short A. So because the phonics focus this week is the voiced and unvoiced TH, I try to use a lot of and sounds for my students throughout the week, just to get them familiar hearing it, seeing it, writing with it, all of that good stuff. Like it is just basically overkill, if you will, to just get it to solidify and get stored permanently in their brain so that every time they see this letter combination in a book, they remember the sound and they're going to know what it is. Anytime that they're writing and they need a th or th sound, they're going to remember it and they're going to know quickly with automaticity what to write down. So for this particular one, I would say like ch, I, what's the word? Chimp. Hopefully the kids can hear that. Sometimes they can't. And here's the thing. When they can't do a certain skill, you can't just say, oh, this isn't working, I have to try something new. When it is research-based, you have to learn to trust the process. It's not that they can't do it, it's that they can't do it yet, and they just need more practice. Or you might even have to go back down to just 2 or 3 sounds, or even just say the one sound slowly. Like I will say ch, I, And if they can't hear that, then I might say ch, imp, and then break it down to a smaller amount of sounds until they can hear it, and then try to spread it back out again, maybe on another day, maybe in small group, to see if they can start to hear those sounds, because it really is so difficult for them to hear. It's something that you've got to give yourself grace teaching, and you have to give them patience when you're teaching it, because it just seems like, are you tricking me right now? Are you messing around? You really can't hear what I'm saying? And they truly can't. Their brains are not ready for it. When they can hear it, they will excitedly let you know. So going through all of the sounds, like there is pray, so p, r, a. If there's any blends, you want to make sure to split those apart, because you want your students to be able to hear a word like pray and not just be like pr, pr, pr. I don't know what letter that is, but instead realize, oh, it's a P and an R making a p, r sound. So they need to know how to separate all of those things. Speaking of separating things, that takes us to segmenting sounds, where I have my students break the sounds apart and then write it down. If it's really early on in kindergarten and their writing skills aren't there yet, or they don't know all the letter sounds yet, I stick to just the listening activities. As soon as we can pair it with writing, it is game on, and that really accelerates and solidifies their learning even faster. In my experience, I have done 2-3 years without dry erase boards at the carpet when I'm teaching phonics and phonemic awareness whole group. And then the year that I started to implement it, I saw students take off really, really early, and it just helped them really learn and retain a lot of the skills faster. So I'm always a fan of writing it down as soon as you can, especially in a dry erase format. I don't know what it is about dry erase. I really think it's because they can erase so easily. So making a mistake is harmless. They don't have to worry about getting an eraser, or my eraser doesn't work, or they made a hole in their paper and now their paper is all smudgy. They can just quickly erase it and try again, carefree. I feel like my students really love that. Also, they have the ability to do their work and hold it up and get a nod from me or a thumbs up or, oh, good job. I am walking around, I can clearly see that everybody is engaged. When I'm just doing phonological awareness activities and I wasn't doing dry erase boards and students were just calling things out, Some students get to sit there quietly and not even really think about anything, and their brains aren't doing that heavy lifting or getting that workout. I tell my students, like, this is a workout for your brain. Like, your brains right now are like, like really stretching and growing. I always say, Miss O'Brien would never do anything that's going to waste your time. Like, you need to be practicing this. Also, when they're writing it down and not just going one at a time. So let's say you don't make everyone call it out. Say you call in everybody. While the other students are waiting for their turn, they're checked out some of the time, and you can't guarantee that they're engaged. When everybody has a dry erase board and everybody is writing or drawing, I can quickly see who's engaged and who's not. I can see who's getting it quickly and who needs a little bit more time. This helps me adjust for small group. Okay, I'm gonna pull these kids and work on this. Okay, when they come to small group, we're gonna review this because they seem to be having a little bit of trouble with this. So with this one, so the word is puck. I'm gonna tell my students, puck. Please stretch that apart into 3 separate sounds. And then we might even be incorporating, hand motions. I love to bring in, I have magnetiles in my classroom. We have Unifix cubes, like anything you can do to change it up. Let's say you're doing magnetiles and that gets the students super excited for a few weeks, but then they start to get a little bit bored of them. Put those away and get out Play-Doh. Now we're squishing the sounds. They get bored of that, put that away, and now we're getting out the fingers. K. You're really doing a lot of the same routines and things over and over and over again, but finding a way to make it feel new and fresh to the kids, because it honestly is a very simple thing that they need. It's just the repetition and the practice with different sounds over and over again. And the trick is to continue to make it fun and engaging for them, and not just the same old drills in the same spot every single day in the exact same way. So moving on, I introduce my sounds of the week. This is when I would go to my sound wall, and I'll show you what that looks like later on. I feel like I keep saying later on. But I have my sound wall where all of the locks, so I have the cards that are on this wall, and at the beginning of the year, there's just locks there. And I tell my students, by the end of the year, we are gonna be uncovering most of these locks. Like, if we're lucky, we'll get to all of them, because you never know if you're gonna be able to get through everything, or if just the pace of the class, you may not be able to get through it all. And that's okay, because you have to go at their pace, right? Also, in small group time, you can accelerate or slow down for what students need. I always want to work for the good of the group, but then there are students that need differentiation, right? They just want to go a little bit faster, or they can handle going a little bit faster, or there's students that even the week isn't, enough for them to retain stuff, and that is okay. All brains work differently, and it's a lot of spiral review and a lot of practice in those groups until they eventually get it, and they will. So I introduce the sound. I teach them the letters, right? We practice writing it properly, because handwriting matters and letter formation matters. And I also teach them what the anchor pictures are, just in case it's a picture they're not familiar with, or it's something that they may be pronouncing wrong, because we don't want them to look at the sound wall and then be like, what is that supposed to be? I wouldn't want them to look at this and think brain and then be like, oh, TH, what does TH say, bruh? Okay, this is think, the think. So every time throughout the week, what is this card? Why is this picture here? Because it's for think, This is the, because this TH says the. So you make sure that they know the picture, they can recognize the letters, they know the sound, and then you go over the formation of the mouth. It's so important that they know, I always say, bite your tongue lightly, because some kids are just I can't even think. I know there's a student in my class, he doesn't do it right. His tongue is not out somehow. And I'm like, you have to stick your tongue out and you bite it a little bit and you blow the air. So you're and you really have to make sure they're all doing it right. And I am not the biggest fan of teeth and looking at people's mouths, but I'm scanning all their mouths. Okay, this is what it should look like. Show me your mouth. Does your mouth look like my mouth? And then you make sure that all of that is, just good with all of them before moving on. This routine is a fantastic one that I can't stress enough. It's so simple, but it's so powerful for just getting them to store these words and these letter sounds and the spelling and the formation in their brain. So what they're going to do, and again, I always have dry erase boards. I do have printables of these available as well, where there actually is the dotted lines for them to trace, but I have the letters. I show them on the board how to make it, and they would just divide their boards into 3 different slots, and we say, huh. And then they write it again and say the other sound, whatever sound you're focused on. Do it again, do it again, do it again. Then they copy it. And I have my students always working with partners. So I'm like, check in with your partner. Make sure their letters are looking right. Make sure nothing's backwards. Make sure they're saying the sound. And in the beginning of the year, some of them just try to race through it to be like, I'm done. And I'm like, friends, it is not about getting done fast. Your brain needs to hear yourself say it while you look at the letters, while you're writing it, so that all of this information is going into your brain. If you've ever seen a scan of the brain when it first looks at a word to read it, all of these areas light up. It starts in where it gets received, and it glows through the brain, and it's the coolest imaging I've ever seen. If you look up how the brain learns to read on YouTube, you could find this really cool video from this neurologist. Anyway, or neuroscientist. Anyway, I tell them that all the time. I'm like, I'm not wasting your time. I know it feels silly, but just say it. You're going to write it. Write it, look at it, say it, hear it, so that your brain can store this. And then for the avert column, they can look up while they do it, avert your eyes, or they can close their eyes while they do it. And I have my partners make sure that your partner isn't looking, because it's helping your brain know how to form that letter just from muscle memory, and you're still saying the sound. So this is a very easy but powerful routine that we did every single day in order to strengthen our skills. And my students really loved it. They loved being able to close their eyes and seeing how well they could still write, or not mess up the letters. Then I introduced spelling words that have the focus sound in it. I feel like the parents really loved it. They were always really excited to see how their students were doing. Because for me, this was more than just a spelling test. It's not just can you spell, it's can you segment sounds? Can you hear all of the sounds in the word that I said? When I say bath, did you hear the b and the a and the th? Did you remember the focus sound and use it to help you spell? Did you remember how to form the letters? Did you put the letters in the right space? Did you put bath? Did you put the TH first? So when I am looking over their spelling assessments, there's so much information that I can take in that I can then target the next week to say, okay, this student is clearly still not segmenting sounds. I will have students that come in and the only sound that they write down is the focus sound. So they heard that sound and they wrote it down, but maybe they still were working on the consonants or the vowels and things like that. So it shows me what I still need to keep working on, or what I need to review with certain students, or that we're on the right track and that we can continue to move on. So we teach the spelling words. I introduce them. I sound them out just to make sure pronunciation is there. I have them repeat after me. Then we map the sounds. This is another part where, all the parts are good because they're all research-based. None of it's fluff. Is where we are saying the sounds. Bath, b, a, write it down. And they do it. And I have activities, I have printables where they have the actual boxes and they know that it's one sound in each box. And when I have a Promethean board, so I have this projected on the board. And when I do it, it's one sound per box, not one letter per box. So for bath, it would be b, the B in one box, a, the A in a different box, and the TH together in one box. And I would ask my students, why is this TH together? Because it's making one sound. It's not t, h, the is working together. Just to get their brains to recognize when you see a TH together, it's now a digraph and it's making this sound. So going through mapping all of these is just another way to have students get these words permanently stored in their brain and get these sounds stored in their brain so they can recall them quicker. We talk about how many focus sounds do you hear? How does this help us? Why are we doing this? If there's any irregular parts, we'll put a heart above it to remind ourselves oh, this usually makes this sound, but for some reason it's making this sound, and here's what we need to remember to, be able to read this word. We do the same routine with our high frequency words, or sight words as some people like to call them. So I have my high frequency words and sight words rolled out by the phonics element that we are learning, which is why all of these, or most of these, have the T8 sound, because that's the sound I introduce to my students. So we practice these words all week. So with, and again, we would map it. Wa, I. We would put it in the box. Wa, the W, I, and then what's the th? And then this is where I'm really exaggerating and like, oh, let me go look at the sound wall. Where is it? Oh, I see the brain. That means think, think, think. TH says the. I need a TH. And then really model how to use the sound wall so that students know exactly how they should be using it. I don't cover my sound wall during a spelling test. In fact, I have the digital version like projected on the board so they can see it. And I'm like, use this. I want you to use it. I want them to know how to use it so that they can, use it on their own without me pointing it out for them. And then eventually over time, they don't need it as much. In the beginning of the year, my students were always turning to look at the sound wall. Like they'd get to a word in a book and I'd be like, wait, that's on the sound wall. They'd find it, they'd look at the anchor picture and it would help them. And then eventually they didn't need it anymore. And that's the point I feel like we are in second grade. It's okay if you need this because I'm helping you get ready to transition on to third grade. And it's okay if you're needing the scaffold for a few months or a few weeks or even just a few days, like whatever time frame that your brain needs, that is okay for me because eventually they will learn it and they will pick it up. So that's just really one day of whole group. So then the second day is, just more of the same, but different examples like blending with TH words, segmenting with TH words. Again, we go over the sounds. I love trying to find a video on YouTube. There's always a video. If you just type in like TH phonics song or something like that, you can find something, play it for them because I want it stuck in their heads. Like I always tell them, by Thursday, I want you to be so sick of seeing TH that it's coming out of your ears and you just remember it for the rest of the school year. So like, I'm like drill and kill, like that's what we're doing, but in a fun way using research-based routines. We do the trace, copy, and avert again. We go over the spelling words. They map the words. Now this is only day 2, so they're not all perfect. They're not just like, oh, this is easy. They really are turning with their partners and working. I'm correcting in the moment. Because another really important component of structured literacy is to make sure that you are giving feedback. It is very direct and explicit. You're not just, oh, what do you think? Whatever goes. No, direct feedback in the moment. We don't want them thinking the wrong thing and then correcting them later. We want them doing the right thing from the very jump. Like we want it to be very direct and feedback right away to fix it so that they can know what they did wrong and they can do it right moving forward. We go over the sight words again. My students love, I'll cover the words and then I ask them to spell it on their boards and I'm like, I want to see you sounding it out, and they really do it. Like they love feeling successful. They feel a little bit better about it the second day. And then the third day, they're even a little bit more comfortable. I'm asking them the blends, they're going with it. Now, this depends on how far in the school year this is because some students really start hearing the blends and some students still can't, and that is okay. And I'm always reminding my students that everyone learns at different rates. A lot of students will start to say like, oh, this is so easy. And I, start to train them not to say that, like say, it's not easy for everybody. Just say like, oh, I'm really good at this, or this was easy for me even, or don't even say anything at all. Just encourage each other, be proud of yourself, but you don't have to say this was easy, or say like, I'm done, and then, stress other people out who weren't done as quickly. And I always tell, everyone, compare yourself to yourself yesterday. Don't worry about, someone else finishing something. Worry about, did I finish yesterday, or did I do better than I did yesterday? If I got 1 yesterday, maybe I got 2 right today, and that's what matters the most. So again, practicing segmenting, and then digraphs. We get back into the, what are these? Where do we find them on the sight word wall? Can you think of any words like the circle map there? I'll teach them like put a TH in the middle of the circle, make another circle around it. How many words can you think of? And then they start recalling some of the spelling words, and I challenge them to think of other words that are not our spelling words. And they really start realizing, oh, we do know this sound. Even if we didn't know how to spell it, we've heard this sound before. This can be a little bit tricky with ELL students or language learners, emerging bilinguals or emerging trilinguals, that really can't think of anything other than what the spelling words are. And I think it's so important to just still make sure to honor what they are learning and let them know how hard it is to be learning 2 different languages and how cool it is to know more than one language and not make them feel limited, but help them see that it's actually a really amazing thing that they were able to navigate 2 languages if they're learning another language. Again, trace, copy, avert. They try to get better at like closing their eyes, like they just love the routine. Reviewing the spelling words again. I'll have them read it to me, make sure their pronunciation is there, make sure the mouth formation is proper, especially with a lot of those vowels, making sure they're really saying the ah and the ah, the I, the ed, not mixing up the I's and the E's, because that can be really tricky for students, especially students that are learning English. Mapping the words properly with their students. Hopefully by day 3 and day 4, they are getting them all correct. They're not making the same mistakes that they made the day before. This is also the time when, so I have been lucky enough to always have devices in my classroom, like iPads or Chromebooks. So by, a few weeks, months into the school year, you're gonna have your early finishers. You're gonna have your students that by day 3 or 4, like maybe it's new to them, but by day 3 and 4, they've got it. Or, by Tuesday, by the second day, they were like, nope, I've got it. It's in my brain. You work on it in a small group. They practice it. They're good to go. I don't force them to do the same routine. I will let them go on a device during this time, or they can go work on, I have early finisher packets that I have them work on. So I'll send them off to the computers, and we're usually working on Starfall or other reading programs, and I let them work with different sounds. Like, okay, you guys can go, or even a YouTube video, you guys can go watch this advanced phonics video on YouTube, and you can learn the new sounds since you're picking up stuff, really early or really quickly. There on Starfall, there's a 3, 4, 5 section that my students that I really noticed were just really picking it up and taking off. And they wanted the challenge. So I was like, okay, you can go over here and read these like upper grade stories or start getting exposed to these other lessons. And they really appreciated that. They appreciated not having to sit there and get a lesson that they didn't need. And that was great, because when those 4 or 5 students would leave the carpet and leave me with my other, 18 or so students who the lesson was just right for, then I could really, hone in on them and take my time going through it without worrying that I was boring some of them, so the other ones got taken care of. They knew that if you're showing me mastery by day 2, 3, then yeah, on day 4 and 5, you can head over to the computers. You can work on something that's more your speed or something that you're interested in. I would also let them go on Brain Pop and, pick a topic that they wanted to learn more about. They would write about it. They would take notes about it, make a little booklet or a brochure or something and turn it into me. They're still learning and they're not feeling like they're held back. So that's something I wanted to throw out there. But just reviewing these words, and I know this seems really repetitive, but trust me, they need it. They're not suddenly just remembering all of these, because then remember, they're doing this every week. So you're still having to know, like, okay, well, do you know all the other words from last week during small group when we're reading other books, and they're having to recall all of these words and sounds. Like, it is still a lot for them. So the practice, the more practice, the better, because also a spelling test is coming on Friday, so you need to be ready for it. So on days 3, 4, and 5, there's also reading practice, where now you're going to put all the skills you've been practicing together to read. So use sight words that we know, use the sound of the week that we know, use all of your blending skills that we've been working on in order to read the sentence. And then it just keeps going in the same format. So different examples, but then the same skills to practice and practice and practice. They're feeling really good by day 4. Day 1, my students were always like, this is so hard. These words, oh, you're trying to trick us. And I'm like, I'm not trying to trick you. We're going to learn it. You're going to feel really good by Thursday. And Thursday, they're feeling great. The spelling test they know is going to come on Friday. They're feeling confident. They're feeling happy. They're like, oh, yeah, we've got this. They're checking their partner's work. Everyone's getting all of them right. They're feeling really confident and excited about it. They're knowing all of their sight words. They're reading with it. Same thing for day 5. And then this is when we would move into an assessment. And I'll show you what some of those assessments and printables can look like in my classroom and what they could look like in your classroom. So, and you don't have to have fancy slides. I do have a reading membership where I have all of the slides from week 1 all the way to week 46 in a systematic order that cycles through all of the phonological awareness and phonics. But you don't have to have fancy slides. You just need a phonics plan that's going to go in order. And you need to be cycling through all of the phonological awareness activities, syllables, rhyming, onset and rhyme, beginning sounds. If you're familiar with the reading program, they are actually coming out with a phonics program, but Heggerty has really great phonological awareness drills. I actually, on my website, readlikearockstarteaching.com, I have some free phonological awareness downloads. If you go to the site and there's like a little phonological awareness tab at the top, there's a little ear. You can click on that and there's a free download for you to get started. So it doesn't have to be fancy. I find that slides really hold students' attention and it keeps them engaged. It keeps me on track. I know exactly what to do because it's all there laid out in front of me, but it doesn't have to be fancy. It just has to be research-based and right. So I'll show you what the printables look like and also what the assessment looks like for this. Okay, so here are what some of the printables I use look like. They are also a part of my reading membership, which I have like a really big discount code if you're interested in checking it out at like half price for a month or two and then just staying in it. New stuff is always being added in addition to the weeks. There's training videos, there's going to be live events. It's going to be fantastic. But so trace, copy, cover, which is what I showed you during the whole group thing, but they get to actually, you know, trace over the sounds while they say it, copy it again. They should fold over the paper and then practice it again because we really wanted to solidify into their brain. So I do whole group in the morning, and then later on when we're doing reading centers, they get that chance and they're more like independent. They're at my table, they're at, you know, another small group area, that are reading area, that they're bored playing reading games, and they get the chance to take what we practice all together and really work on it in a more individual way. So there's lots of different phonics activities for them to get into to just, again, work with those sounds and solidify that thinking and really store it in their brains, because that's the goal. We don't want them to learn it and then forget about it as they move on to other things, which is another reason why it's so important to just keep spiral reviewing and checking in with students. But mapping the sounds where they're going to say the word like bath, put one sound in each box. You know, on their dry erase boards, they don't have those boxes, but in the printables, they have the opportunity to really practice mapping the sounds properly, tapping the sounds out and drawing pictures to show that they understand the word that they blended together. This was always my students' favorite, the word searches, where they got to map the sounds first. I would always put a little card over the word search to make sure they weren't just finding the word and then copying it, but really taking the time to sound it out, write the letters down, one sound, not letter, one blend, one sound in each box, and that may be one letter, two letters, three letters, and then they would find in the word search. Their absolute favorite worksheet that I would have my students do all year. Segmenting sounds, blending, segmenting, such important skills. So those are the ones we really want them to be practicing. They give you the most bang for your buck. They're also on the scale of like what's tricky for phonological awareness and phonemic awareness. Blending and segmenting are pretty complex, so give them grace. It might look really easy for us, but it can be pretty tricky for them. So just helping them sound out words as needed, but also allowing them that productive struggle so that their brains are really, again, getting that workout to really think about the sounds, separate them, and stretch them out. Practicing high frequency words where I would just tell them one of our focus words. They would map the sounds and then they would write it down themselves. Practicing our spelling words. There's research to show that when students are using bumpy surfaces, different materials like paper, marker, pens, you can even have them practice writing in shaving cream. All of that, just multi-sensory experiences, help, grow connections in their brain and just help them remember this stuff even faster. And then I also have fluency grids where they're just getting that practice of reading at the word level to practice reading the words and saying all the sounds together with the focus sound for the week. And then all of this leads to them being able to read some of these words in context, which I do actually also include decodable readers, and I'll show you what those look like. So I love using decodable readers. It is so hard to find true decodable readers. And when I say that, I mean not just a leveled text that just targets a few sounds, but then they include a whole bunch of sounds that the students haven't learned yet. This is why it's so important to follow a specific order or a specific sequence when you're teaching phonics, because then you know what your kids know. You know, I've only taught A through Z, short vowels, blends, and digraphs, so I cannot include, long vowels. I cannot include this sound. I cannot include ing. I can't include this because they don't know it yet. Anything they don't know, you would have to pre-teach. So you have to make sure that you have exposed students to these words via high frequency word practice, or it's something that's already been turned over on the site wall, or you even just pre-teach it in the moment before you place this text in front of them. Now, I know that this isn't real life. They're going to encounter books where they haven't seen these words before, and we can't just give them this like phonics perfect bubble that's protected. But for the context of teaching them how to read, yes, we can, and yes, we will. So make sure that they are just feeling successful. They realize like, oh, wow, these words follow patterns that I've been taught. I can blend and segment. Oh, I know that high frequency word. We've been practicing it all week. I can read this. I feel successful. I would print out 5 or 6 of these for my back table, and my students would come to the table, they would get their pointers, and they would practice reading, and we practice it every day, and each day they would get a little bit stronger and a little bit stronger. And then I would laminate one of them at the end of the week and put it in my reading center. That way students could keep going back to old skills so that they wouldn't get rusty. Like, it's all about learning it, but then also spiral reviewing it, because if you don't use it, you'll lose it. And you can't just be like, oh my gosh, you knew that 3 weeks ago. Okay, but you can't teach it and then never talk about it again, right? You can't set it and forget it. You have to set it and then keep coming back to it and tending to it and taking care of it. It's a garden. It's not just something you can toss out in the wind and say, good luck. You have to keep tending to it. So writing your own decodable readers is not as hard as it seems. Really think about what your students know. And again, like, I love something cute. It doesn't have to be cute. If your students can feel successful reading it, they're going to enjoy it. You can write it out, make copies for everybody. You can have the students come up with the story themselves and say, like, okay, let's think about the words that we know. That's going to help us practice. So they can move from just fluency at the sound level up to fluency at the word level, then onto fluency at the sentence and passage level, as we see in these decodable readers. So those are also available in my reading membership, or you could definitely take a stab at it and try your own. Last but not least, here is what my weekly assessments would look like, or similar to this. I had my students have their spelling test. So those same words that we've been practicing all week, I would, write them down, come up with sentences to use them in context, and they would have to sit there and, do it. And again, I had my sound wall still up in the classroom so they could use it. And then I would have my students have to sound out words that had the focus sound in it, and then draw a picture of what it was to show me that they could read it, understand it, and produce a picture that matched it. And as the year goes on, it moved on to reading little sentences and having to illustrate a picture of the sentence to make sure that they could read with that focus sound. And that is really it. It's just, and then from those phonics assessments, I would know, okay, I'm going to change this small group next week, or I'm going to make sure to review this when I'm doing my phonological awareness. I'm going to make sure to review this, or when I'm doing phonics videos next week, I'm going to keep replaying TH, even though we've moved on to our new sound, because I don't want my students to forget this. Like, maybe a few students didn't get it, or if everyone bombed the test, we're going to stay on TH because clearly we don't need to be moving on to a new sound. I think that would be very unlikely that you would be doing all these research-based activities and all of the students just bomb the test, like there's something really, wrong going on there. But you do want to use the assessments to inform your instruction moving forward. Even with a lot of students with IEPs and different learning needs, a lot of chronic absences and tardies in my class, students were still able to grow because when they were there and they were getting instruction, it was sound instruction that was backed by research. And hey, we can only do what we can do, and we can only control so much. So just do the best you can. When they're there, I'm always like, happy that you're here. Let's go. And I'm really happy with the success that I saw with my students following all of these research-based strategies. It's always been really great year after year. I hope that any of these tips were helpful, and I'm excited for you to even just take one new thing back to your classroom or into your home. I know it would be really hard if this is nothing like what you're used to doing to try to incorporate everything all at once. Try with one small routine, like try incorporating the trace, copy, cover, avert. Try out a sound wall. Try out phonological awareness that is paired with your phonics sound of the week. Try phonological awareness, period. With that one though, know that you have to trust the process. It's going to take a few months to change that part of their brain to really see the results, but definitely it is research-based. All students need it. It's usually the missing thing that students are lacking when they are struggling readers. And make sure you're doing it right. Make sure a lot of it is just sounds-based. You're not allowing them to shout out letters. For example, if you say, what is the beginning sound of cat? And they're saying C, you want to be excited for that, but they're just thinking about like, okay, I've seen the word and there's a C at the beginning. can they hear the sound? Can they isolate and hear the sound? Can they hear the k? Can they hear the a? Can they hear the t? That is more important than them just knowing that there's a C at the beginning of that word. What sound does it make? What sound does it sound like? If you change the k to a b, what's the new word? You know, can they do stuff like that? That's the stuff that you really want them focused on. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me for this. I hope it was helpful. I'm going to have a coupon code linked here, and if you head to bit.ly/phonics time and use this coupon code, then you can get into my reading membership and have access to all 46 weeks of these slides, which are perfect for K through 2. And you get the first 2 months 50% off. Go in there, try some weeks out. Even before you purchase anything, there's 3 weeks that are for free that you can try out on your own to see if it's something that's going to fit your style. You can test it out in your classrooms and see if it's even a routine that you have time for or that your students enjoy. Thank you so much for your time.